Who proposed the city manager? Was that a customer? Yeah, out of Dallas. Did you look at it that way? I can't remember.
No. What I was looking at, I've been always a strong opponent of strong checks and balances. And I don't think I ever said, I came.
You're still a politician. What he's trying to say in 4-letter words was he was against a strong mayor.
Yeah, and that was one of the splits down the center.
Checks and balances.
I think we're missing an important issue here, and I think it may come out nice in the tape that all of us are from different parts of the cities, and that certainly influenced on what our feelings were. But the bottom line here is not whether Cliff was from somewhere. I lived in Chicago 4 years, and I'd seen the daily situation. That had some impact. The impact was not because I came from Pennsylvania or lived in Chicago or that he was from New Jersey. To some extent, that had an effect. The bottom line was we were involved in a very, very political city at that point in time.
Oh, yeah.
And the things that were happening right then and there, not 10 years ago or 5 years ago or 10 years in the future, what was happening right there had a dramatic impact on the way that we were looking at things. And
That was the total governing factor.
there's no question about it. That was the key factor. And the point of the matter was that there were two distinct factions on council. And there were two distinct factions basically on this commission and everywhere in the city.
And this whole thing, the present form of government is a compromise
From those two factions.
And in fact, it's been changed since then.
with the number of councils.
Yeah, by adding another council person.
And in fact, Rob Dillard, who was the city attorney, was.
That's the best thing.
Yeah. Dillard got it changed to make the mayor a strong mayor.
Okay, so essentially what came from this body was
Weak mayor.
weak mayor,
Mayor, strong council.
strong council.
But counterbalanced by a strong city manager,
Okay.
a professional.
But the city manager being held in check because of by
Our compromise essentially
Right.
came down
That was the
to
verbiage.
a five-member council. And those 5 members were elected at large. They would have the vote on what would be done, how the issues would be answered. The mayor would only get to discuss in all the topics of conversation, but he would not vote unless it required his vote for a tie break. And a tie break could only occur if there was not a full complement of council there. So our intent was to have a very strong council. That way you allow 5 elected officials the discussion and the vote, and you don't really. In fact, I think it's not so much just a strong council per se, but it gives less power to everybody.
It's interesting to me what came out in the charter was just absolutely outstanding. Everybody was proud of it. And when all else was said and done, that's what counted.
Well, that's what gained the respect of everybody.
Yeah.
Everybody was.
When I got up there and presented the charter to the city council, I had goosebumps in my head to toe. I was so proud of that thing. And when I found out that Dillard was going to rip it up later on and take this out and throw that in, I could have shot that man. I mean, it wouldn't. If he'd walked down my street, my wife said, "Don't go to the council, stay home." You know,
Phone call started all over.
It wouldn't have taken much. Matter of fact, just the sight, because that was something to be proud of. We were on it, and anybody can work under those rules. Any city, anywhere.
When did you become city manager, and how? What I guess what I'm trying to ask is when that did happen, did you perceive yourself any differently, or?
Again, first month I was administrative assistant to the council.
Right.
About a month into it, I was called city administrator. It was January of the next year, which would have been January of '79, that the home rule charter election was passed. And at that point in time, I was officially appointed city manager. I think what people will never appreciate or understand now was city administrator or city manager, either one was a new thing, a new being for the colony of Texas. The powers that went with that job, and typically go with that job in any other city, was a change. It had to be established. When I first, to give you some examples, when I first got there to hire a police officer, that police officer actually interviewed with the council. So initially, as city administrator, I did not have the authority to actually hire even a police officer. They actually interviewed a maintenance worker that we were going to hire. So the council was very involved at the beginning. They had to approve all expenditures at the beginning. Well, now this is not the way other cities are run with city managers. So over the first few months, I think the council had to grow confident in me, first of all. Second of all, they had to grow confident in the position itself, that they could actually turn those powers over to an individual. Eventually, I think most of them began to see that it was necessary to do that. You can't have 6 or 7 people running an organization. You have to get it down to the way the system actually works. So when the city manager, by the time I was actually appointed city manager, it wasn't a black and white situation. It wasn't a night and day situation. It was the charter that was approved did officially give me some of those powers, such as hiring and firing. So by that time, they were pretty well comfortable with me anyway. And second of all, now according to the charter, I did have that power. So I did not have to take then a police officer to the council to be interviewed. They were comfortable that between the chief and myself, we were capable of hiring good police officers. Eventually, the expenditures where the council would have to approve expenditures in a general law city, they reached a point they didn't have to in a home rule city. And we started working on our zoning ordinance and got that adopted, trying to get a handle again on the growth.
When I was the initial chairman of the Planning and Zoning Commission for 2 years, and I wrote the first zoning ordinance. And I would say that was my hardest, most significant contribution. I understand it's been changed significantly since then. But I want to tell you, we worked hard for that.
Would you like to go back out?
Talk about your work on the Planning and Zoning Commission. First of all, how were you selected to serve? Had you expressed an interest? Had you volunteered? Or did someone suggest your name? How did you come to be chosen to serve on the Planning and Zoning Commission?
Because of the work I'd done on the Civil Defense Committee as the chairman, they felt that I had very good organizational skills and felt that I'd be beneficial to them. And it was just starting out, and we were all starting out at the same level. Not many of us knew anything about zoning, but I guess they felt that I didn't know much about zoning, but if I wanted to know something, I'd go find someone who could help me with it. And so I really enjoy that. I still enjoy anything to do with zoning, and I work with that now in my job a little bit. And so it's very interesting to me to be able to get paid now for doing something I did free then. But it's I enjoyed the zoning. We had lots of battles within the P&Z as far as what kind of zoning ordinance we should have, but it was very interesting to me, and I enjoyed it a great deal.
Can you elaborate a little bit on the significant issues that took place in planning and zoning, some of the conflicts that occurred?
Certainly. I think the biggest issue was probably density. What we did was take the comprehensive zoning ordinance from several different cities, and the foundation for the colony zoning ordinance was from the Dallas zoning ordinance. And of course, Dallas has perhaps 10 single-family classifications and 10 multifamily, and we were a rather mixed group of people, and there were some people that were developers on P&Z who felt that we should have higher density. And I, on the other hand, at that time was an idealist and felt that perhaps we should have lower density. But I think we never had arguments. We just had friendly discussions, and I think in the end that was the main thing, and just where retail should go, and just the ins and out of a zoning ordinance. Just trying to, I think the zoning ordinance has been a good foundation for the colony, although I know it's been changed. I thought at that time it was a good document, and we worked extremely hard on it to make it effective.
Could you define the concepts of low density and high density just a little bit?
Low density would be less houses per acre, and higher density would be apartments, townhouses, where you get, say, 8 units to the acre rather than 2 units to the acre. I think my idea, when we moved to Texas, we thought land everywhere, and so high density seems so terrible to us. And I guess I've changed my mind since then. I feel there's a need for it, but I think that was our main objective then. Is that some people felt that the higher the density, it would be better, and there were others of us, and we sort of came to a happy medium in the middle about the density issue.
Can you name some of the other individuals that were serving on planning and zoning when you were?
Yes, Art Welty and Harry Hunsicker, who I know you've interviewed, and trying to think who else. It's been such a long time. We had a great middleman with Frank Graham, who was with Fox and Jacobs, who worked with us very closely. Mike Mansfield was on planning and zoning, and Bob Brown. And we were really, I thought, a well-blended group of people. We had a little bit of everything from everywhere, so I thought we had a good group.
You mentioned specifically the master land plan. Can you talk more about that plan and what it was and how it was conceived?
Well, when the city decided to incorporate, it was decided that that a comprehensive master land plan should be drawn up to define where single-family residence would be, where multifamily, any retail, churches, anything like that. And so Fox and Jacobs contracted with Strickland Rollins, who is a land planner in Arlington, to work with the city officials and the planning and zoning members to sit down and work out a concept on what the colony would look like in the next 5 to 10 years. And so we had a lot of meetings and worked out where everyone felt the single family residence should be, looking at multifamily and all the other retail areas within the colony where shopping centers should be. And it gave us an overall view of what the colony would look like, and also gave, I think, some goals on where we wanted to go from here, what kind of city we wanted. And I think that Strickland Rollins, it's since been revised, but they did a really good job on it, and they were very cooperative, dealing with people who didn't know that much about planning and zoning or master land plans, but they gathered a lot of resources for us and helped us make a lot of decisions that are, I think, affecting the city today.
Relationship with Fox and Jacobs, we worked on that. A lot of people were concerned that Fox and Jacobs had too much control in the colony. So
I was going to say, you mentioned earlier Joe Larkin. Was he not the liaison for Fox and Jacobs?
He later became that.
Yes.
Joel, I think, played a significant part in the history of the colony. When the colony incorporated back, I guess, January of 78, I think one of the best moves that city council made was hiring Joel as a consultant, because you had a bunch of people on the council that didn't know anything about running a city. They brought Joel in as a consultant to help them, set up ordinances, personnel procedures, and so forth.
Did he play any part in working with you, advising you also?
Well, Joel's role was, again, he helped them hiring me. And for the first 30 days or so, Joel came out and kind of got me oriented, because he was working for the city at that point. But I guess it was just 30 to 60 days in. Joel was smart enough that he knew that his need was diminishing. Since they had me on board, they really didn't need him also. So at that point in time, he went to work for Fox and Jacobs. So his hat changed. Mm-hmm. And we had to recognize that. He wasn't working for us anymore. His interests were for Fox and Jacobs. But his interests were still for the colony, because, again, a lot of people were concerned about the power that F&J had out there. They felt like they were controlling too much. Well, first of all, they were building the whole city. So I think anybody that, naturally, they were controlling the destiny of that city. But we tried to, from the council standpoint and from my standpoint and the staff standpoint, we tried to immediately establish a working relationship. And the way it was this. We respected the fact that they were the primary developer out there. But we made them quickly respect the fact that we were now a city. And we had certain powers that they were going to have to live within. And it was a good relationship. They hired Joel to become the liaison out there. So Joel was a great help in a lot of things. A lot of things we couldn't afford to do on our own, Fox and Jacobs would assist us with. We had to recognize the fact, though, again, that Joel was working for F&J. But in the long run, F&J wanted the best for the city because that was going to be a monument to them. If the colony turned out bad, it would reflect on Fox and Jacobs. If it turned out good, it would reflect on them. So they kind of made Joel available to help in any way he could. We utilized that in many ways, but again, and understand how I say it, we made sure we recognized the fact that he did work for the developer. And the city has to always maintain that fact. We have to look out for the interest of the city and the interest of the citizens, number one, first and foremost. We looked out for the developer second behind that.
Okay. Also during your time, as far as going back to, I guess, important things that happened, was I was going to say the formation of the Citizens Against Taxes, the CAT group, was that happening just as you were leaving, or was that there?
Oh, that was right in the middle.
Right in the middle.
That was right in the middle. I'm glad you mentioned that. That was oh my goodness, cats. We started our budget process at the regular time. We went through a new budget process with the council, and what we did was we established a baseline budget, which was just what it would take to operate the city of the colony at the same level as we did last year. And then we did what we call decision packages, which were new items, like adding a new police officer became the decision package. So we took the council through a very, very professional and elaborate budget. The council just loved it because it gave them a chance to do what their job was, and that was to set the policy level and the level we were going to operate. We had a number of meetings with the council. The week before we went to a public hearing, there was about 15 people in the council room one night as we were going through the budget for the last time before we actually had a public hearing on it. And one of them stood up at the end and said they were concerned about the tax increase. The tax increase that we were proposing was to go from 19 cents to 34 cents. Now, that, as the newspaper later picked up and carried, was, oh my goodness, what was it? No, 19 to what, 39 or 43? Maybe it was like 43 cents. But it was 100 and something percent tax increase, which was true. That's when you figured it, 19 cents to 43 cents, that's what it was. It was 100 and something percent increase. So the newspaper carried that. Well, these 15 people went out, and I've got to give them credit. In 1 week, they got people organized. They got people interested, because it's not hard to get people's attention when you tell them that their taxes are going up 140 something percent. What didn't become clear to a lot of those citizens, we later found out that it wasn't their whole tax bill. It wasn't the mud tax and the school tax and everything going up 143%. It was just the city tax. And it only meant about $7 or $8 a month to a homeowner. Now, if I'd been out there and thought my total tax bill, which let's say was $50, $60, $100 a month, was going to double, I'd have been concerned. Okay? But see, that was getting left out. The average price home in the colony was on the market for, I think, $50 or $60. So the tax increase, like I said, I think it worked out on an average price home. I think it worked out about $7 and something a month. To a flare, which was the upper end, I think it was like 9 something, and it was 5 or 6 to a today home. So, I'm not minimizing that. That was an increase, but it wasn't like they were getting a several $100 increase a year. It was a fairly minimal increase, and they were getting a lot of additional services for it. Well, anyway, the next week they had a meeting, and there was about 100 people in the park, and they were organizing to protest this. We were planning on having our meeting in the council chambers to have the public hearing, which was that little old building then. We decided we'd better move it to a church to have more room. So the next Monday night, we get ready to give our budget presentation, and I'll never forget, I stood up to present the budget, and the church, that Methodist church on Page Road, was completely full, and it was flowing out into the parking lot. I had 4 TV cameras in my face to do the budget presentation. I figured out real quick they weren't there to give the council and myself any awards. We had to make a tough decision. We started making the presentation, and all of a sudden the people outside couldn't hear, so there was a big rumble that started. So we finally decided, let's move this meeting to the parking lot of City Hall. So there were 400 or 500 people there. We moved the meeting over there, and the mayor and I stood up on the doorsteps.
Can I interrupt?
Sure.
Say, where was the City Hall at this time?
It was so where it is now, same place. We had already gotten that building there, the small building next to the fire station.
Okay, so I just wanted to.
So we moved the meeting onto that parking lot there. The mayor and I stood up there and we answered questions. Long story short, we did answer the questions. They we ended up meeting with them after that. I actually went to a meeting of the CATS group later. As people started finding out what the actual impact to them was, of course, nobody wants an increase at all. But when they found out that we were only talking about a few dollars a month, we weren't talking about hundreds of dollars to them, they backed off. And it got down to there was only probably 15 to 20 people left that were actually still trying to fight us. I know we slowed down our budget process to give the people more chance to have some input. And we ended up missing a time date or something on when the budget was supposed to be filed and put into action. So then they ended up, that last little group of people that were involved with CATS ended up suing us to try to make us not put that budget into effect, and it was thrown out of court. So never heard a thing about it after that. Again, it was just communications. The word got out that their taxes were going up 100 and something percent. Percentages say one thing, dollars say another. When they found out, I'll never forget one person said, well, if I'd have known this, I wouldn't have fooled gotten out. And that was the kind of comment. It was blown out of proportion, but it taught us a lesson. It really did teach us a lesson. It's that the most important thing a city can do, or the worst thing they might not do, is communicate with the citizens. Okay? We learned a lesson. We were doing a good job on the budget. It was a good budget. I didn't apologize to anybody for that increase because the colony was just forming. It needed more police officers. It needed some additional services that we weren't doing. Some of those increases were for things like putting a street maintenance crew out there. Well, you can save $1 today and cost yourself $5 later. I mean, we needed to be doing some preventive maintenance on the street. So that was why there was an increase there. There was for more police officers. We were trying to set up some communications for the police department. There wasn't any frills in there. I mean, quote, unquote, frills. There were services for the citizens that we needed to operate that city. But communications. We learned that lesson. You've got to communicate with your citizens.
This is going back a little bit, but when you were still administrative assistant and the charter was being written, did you feel that or anticipate that the charter would provide for a city manager type of government? Did you have any input into that with the people who were working on the charter?
There never was really a lot of question as to whether there should or shouldn't be a city manager. When I accepted the job, I went in with the understanding that probably the next January I would become city manager. Probably would not have gone in if I hadn't have been that assured of that. And I wasn't guaranteed that. But I was told even at that early stage that I was hired that if everything goes as is planned, they're going to adopt a charter, they are planning on going to the city manager form of government, and you will be appointed. So I went in with that understanding. But I really did not have that much discussion or meeting with that charter commission. They did a good job and they handled it by themselves. I'm sure I talked to a few of the members because I knew some of the members after I got out there, but they really got out and researched it and did their homework.
I want to talk a little bit now about the time that Tom Hart was city manager. think the issue of the tax revolt perhaps might have been one of the more significant things that occurred during his time here. Could you tell us a little bit about that and what went on? And
Well, what happened? He came with us in '78.
Mhm.
And he can correct me on this, but I think he was about 23 years old. He was young. That was in August of '78. The tax revolt, as we call it,
Mhm.
happened in the summer in the fall of '80. I believe when we moved over here, we were in this building when that transpired. So in that 2-year period, I was hired in the first year as just an administrator.
Mhm.
He wasn't a city manager until we went charter in January of '79. And again, my memory of those days were just tumultuous. And he was doing all this. We had a strong council, and he had to report to them daily on every little thing. And the following year, IBM came in, and they purchased land from Fox and Jacobs. They now own about 1,300 acres, from 1,100 from Fox and Jacobs.
Mhm.
They agreed to pay us about $160,000, which was just an enormous amount of money back then, to abandon 3 roadways that ran through their property. We accepted that money. The mood of the council back then was to keep the taxes down,
Mhm.
because that was one of the fears, when you incorporate, was that taxes are going to make it too expensive to live out here. So they chose to use that money, $160,000, to keep our taxes low. That put Tom, as city manager, in the spot of requesting the following year a tremendous tax increase. Now, some people will blame Tom for the way he handled it, or the way the media handled it, or whatever. Other people, I think, will blame the council. But it needed to be. It really did back then. And that was the reason that it came out. Now, what happened, I think, is a lot of the citizens got misinformed.
Mhm.
And they thought this tremendous tax increase, and I'm trying to think, was it 14 or 19 cents? I should know that, but it was an enormous one. Was going to affect all their taxes, because they didn't realize, a lot of them, that utility district taxes are separate from us.
Mhm.
And they just came in mass, to our first hearing on this, and we had a citizens group that organized against the taxes. And I think if you'll talk to some of those people, there were a lot of people then that had the feeling that Tom Hart was just trying to build his own empire, and he didn't have the best interest of the city at heart, and that there was something sneaky, and that he was padding the budget, and we really didn't need that much. And again, the rumors went wild, and what was it really fact, what was really fiction, is really in the mind of the people that were there. Because really there wasn't a right or wrong. You could say, well, we needed X amount of money for this particular line item in the account. Well, that's a matter of opinion. But instead of it just becoming a matter of opinion, it became, you are doing this for an ulterior motive.
Mhm.
For in fact, I truly think most people had the good of the city at heart, but they didn't think the other one did.
Mhm.
And that caused it all.
Well, what finally happened?
In that revolt,
Mhm.
well, we first met, we're hearing at the Methodist Church, which is located on Page Road, just south of the shopping center there at Page and South Colony. We all sat at the front, in the pulpit area. And there was one door on the other side of the building, back to the back. And all the people started coming into the front door. Filled up the sanctuary. They had a little section that was divided off over here for their Sunday school classes, but you could walk through it. So people came up through this area and came up to the back of us.
And people were yelling and screaming. And I remember that's the first time that I thought, my gosh, I could die. You know, I mean, I could be trampled to death. They were that angry. And Richard Turner was our mayor at that time. And we finally saw that we couldn't conduct a meeting. I think we did a little bit. He just recessed the meeting to go to City Hall, because at that time people were screaming, "We can't get in, we can't get in, we can't hear you." We had two women that were directly behind me. But, you know, they were a caring people in the community. But one was on one side and one was on the other of this issue, as well as they had several others. And they started yelling at each other. One hit the other one. They filed a suit in our court, an assault suit, over just that incident. It was so hot. So we just adjourned and we met back here at the parking lot. And then what I was just in a turmoil about was, should we continue the hearing? If we end the hearing, we go back and make the budget. How do we go through all the statutory regulations again? And do we get it adopted before October 1? And we had a charter provision that had to be adopted by a certain date. And we had this citizens group that was against the taxes being raised, that were going to follow us on that, and then make us go back and adhere to the old budget. And that would have ruined us. We would have had to have just laid off employees. We just couldn't. We could have functioned, I guess, but it would have been really a terrible thing to go back to the old budget. And it was just very, very confusing. But finally, we moved forward. The council acted. I would think that was probably their first time to act really strong as a political body. And they adopted the budget, and they adopted a corresponding tax rate, which was lower, but still an increase. And this one group tried to take us to court and didn't get very far. So we proceeded on then with our government. But the next year I was acting city manager at that time, and you better believe we had town hall meetings on every department of what we were going to do. And people knew that we were considering this kind of expenditure for recreation. We were considering this kind of expenditure for police. And we had a lot of people attended these town hall meetings with all. But the next year we had them again. We had very few, and the next year even less, and we stopped.
You had it to do over again. Would you do anything differently?
Oh, I don't know that I really would. Maybe some of the business instead. But we just were very, very fortunate. The timing worked out exactly perfect from our perspective. We had to go through the whole exercise of doing a well and recognizing the well had a lot of minerals in it. How long those wells last. Go with another kind of a water system. They build their own water system, negotiate with the city of Dallas, water. And that it was a great experience. And I don't know that we made any wrong decisions. Maybe the most awkward things instead is the telephone service. We didn't accomplish in that. There was one thing we didn't accomplish at this point, and it was the telephone issue. Still an issue.
Mary Hundt, a resident of the colony, Texas, and a leader in the effort to improve telephone service in the colony.
Tell me, how did you become involved in community affairs in the colony?
Well, when we received our first telephone bill, it was over $100, and I called Information Services to find out why all these, where it said long distance charges, were on the bill. At the time, I did remember asking the representative from Fox and Jacobs who sold us the home what type of telephone service did they have, because we had General in Irving, which was not quite the best. We had many problems, but it was reasonable. It was a flat rate to call any place you wanted to in the Metroplex. So I didn't understand why, when I was calling any place in the Metroplex, that I was being charged long distance rates. And this sales representative never mentioned that telephone calls outside of the colony would be long distance. So I was completely astounded at my telephone bill and thought surely there had to be a mistake. And when I called the representative at Bell Telephone, she said no mistake had been made, that we were under the Frisco Exchange, which allowed us to call any place in the colony, Little Elm, Eastville, Wynwood Village, Estates, Frisco, McKinney, at a flat rate, but anything outside of that area was considered a long distance call.
So that's why you became.
And I became angry and began to write the federal government. I wrote the President of the United States, the federal telephone company, and that they referred me back and said this was a state problem and that the state had just opened up a public utility commission that year. Before that time, there was no such commission. Bell Telephone dealt directly with the consumer in these problems. But now we had a state agency, and they directed me back to the state and to the state governor to solve this problem.
I see. What actions did you take to get other citizens to be concerned and try to do something to help you solve this problem?
Well, first of all, I went back to see if this, I couldn't understand. I asked questions in the neighborhood, and then went to the city council and called and asked if they were aware of this and had other citizens called complaining about this, and they said yes. They informed me about the background of the history of the what had been done already. Fox and Jacobs anticipated that there would be a problem with Southwestern Bell, and Mr. Ron Walden, in September of 1973, contacted Southwestern Bell to provide a two-way extended area service for the colony, but Bell Telephone denied the request, and that again was before the Public Utility Commission was formed. In January 1974, Fox and Jacobs decided it would incorporate its own telephone company called the Lone Star Telephone Company Incorporated to provide that service to the residents. And Bell Telephone informed Fox and Jacobs that they were not in the telephone business and therefore could not do that, could not open up their own telephone business. Fox and Jacobs then in February of 1974 contacted General Telephone and asked General Telephone would they be interested, since they serviced Louisville and we were so close, 7 miles from Louisville, could they just string the lines out here, and especially since right across the street from 121 is General Telephone going into North Carrollton, it would be very easy to come across 121, provide us with telephone service. They informed Fox and Jacobs that they would be glad to do that, but that Bell Telephone absolutely refused to let go of their right-of-ways, their public utility right-of-ways that had been given to them by the state. So Fox and Jacobs then went before the Public Utility Commission, which was formed then in May of 1974, and showed that there was a community of interest in the Dallas metro area. And statistics, a telephone committee was formed under the leadership of Linda Pierce under the Homeowners Association. And they passed around thousands of petitions, and they went to Austin, to the Public Utility Commission, showing that there was indeed an interest in the Dallas metro area for a flat rate base extended area, two-way extended area service in the colony. Bell denied their request in May of 1974. And They also denied, looked into the Lone Star Telephone Corporation company by Fox and Jacobs and informed Fox and Jacobs that they could not do that. And denied that request also.
Is this a PUC that?
The Public Utility Commission now also denied that request. So, having looked at all that had been done before and up to a certain point, I wrote them to the Public Utility Commission asking what needed to be done. And they sent me a letter back itemizing the things that needed to be done and saying that item 1 had already been accomplished, which was to show a community of interest by a majority of the people in the colony. And item 2, the survey had been done. And item 3 was to provide a poll then, which would be sent from the Public Utility Commission. So we were waiting for this poll to take place in which every citizen of the colony who subscribed to Bell Telephone Service would be polled to indicate to the PUC whether they wanted this service or not. And if 50% or more indicated that they did, we would be given this service. I have the letters here that indicate that. The poll was given, more than 50% did indicate they wanted it, and then they said we had to have a meeting.
With the PUC?
The Public Utility Commission said, well, now that the poll is done, we need to have a commission meeting with General Telephone, Bell Telephone, and all of the surrounding communities that would be involved.
Did you attend any of these?
Yes, I was requested to go down because I had formed the Colony Telephone Committee and I was passing out petitions like this. Talk more, pay less, Metro Service, vote yes. And on the back asking people, and we sent down, my husband ran these off, and I know for a fact that I personally sent 1,000 of these down a month for a year. And when I got down there, they could not find them.
Becky? Mary, what do you think will happen in the future? What would be the ideal situations of a problem? Do you have any?
I have mixed emotions about this. We pay our water bill and our electric bill according to how much we use. Perhaps the times has come. Perhaps Bell Telephone, General Telephone, I know the telephone committees are right in saying that we should pay for what we use. At the same time, I use my telephone an awful lot. And I would like to go back to the old way in which it was a flat rate and you could talk for hours and hours as long as you wanted to as far as you wanted to in the metro area.
So are you referring to an optional rather than a stated contract of time?
Possibly an optional situation is the answer, but I don't believe that this will ever take place. Bell Telephone will make the flat rate, and this was brought out at the commission that year. They intend to continue to up the flat rate until it is so unreasonable that the long distance rate looks, I can't think of the word, attractive to the residents, and they will opt to use the long distance rate or the toll rate, as they call it, as they would like to use the term. They don't like they don't exactly like the word long distance rate. They like to use the word toll rate, which means to them you pay it and you pay for what you use.
Well, isn't it true that the Southwestern Bell is intending to reduce the toll charges in the near future?
This is what I have read in the Dallas Morning News. that they keep going back to the Public Utility Commission and saying, we need more money to increase the flat rate service, and we would like to reduce, and if we could do that, then we could reduce the long distance rate or the toll rate. This is from March of 7th, 1982, in which Charlie Dodd is quoted as explaining to a group of citizens at a forum. This was brought up at a forum at that time. And Charlie Dodd explains a little bit about the history and my involvement in it and why it was dropped.
Okay.
So the citizens are still interested in lower telephone rates. Recently, in October 25th, 1984, Rockwall, the city of Rockwall, petitioned the Public Utility Commission for exactly the same type of metro service that we were asking for, and our current city council jumped on the bandwagon, informed the Public Utility Commission that we were first in line to get this service. They sent our present city attorney down there to put a stay on the Rockwall decision until they reopened our case. And I'm glad to see that our present city council, Mayor Larry Sample, Wednesday, April 3rd, 1985, passed a resolution to continue the efforts to get its extended area service. They have our attorney down there working with the Rockwall attorney. And as recently as Saturday, April 27th, right here, the Public Utility Commission is reopening our case, re-examining our request, along with Rockwall and 50 other suburbs of Dallas, asking for the same type of service.
75 and 6, Fox and Jacobs did build a little stop and go that's we now know on 423. And the question kept coming up at meetings and other times, why don't we have a grocery store out here? And Von Walden and others said, well, we've tried and we can't get one. I said, you mean Dave Fox can't get a grocery store or supermarket out here? He said, no, we can't for some reasons. He said, well, I know how to get one. I said, well, if you do, go do it. So I did, and that's how I came to be involved with the Colony as a shopping center.
So your beginning was the shopping center, Colony.
The Colony Square Shopping Center. Lots of mistakes were made with it. If you remember in 1978 when we started it, we were having high inflation, 20% interest rates. Costs were going up every day. We took shortcuts. We wouldn't have taken now. But at that time, we were faced with a real money crunch, and so we would hurry to get it up. Fortunately, we did a lot of mistakes.
Mistakes I'm sure you probably learned from.
Oh, absolutely. Our next one's going to be very, very much different, a lot better.
So you're still involved in the Colony as far as investing?
Yes, we have the two shopping centers, Colony Square and Peters Colony Shopping Center, and we will soon announce a third shopping center with a super large 46,000 square foot Dixie Superstore.
Right. One of the investments that you've been involved in is the Colony Bank. And of course the first shopping center, which we've already talked about. You just recently sold the bank. Are you going to be getting involved anymore?
Well, let me explain about the bank. The bank came about more or less the same way that the shopping center came about. Right? The question came up, we need a place to put our funds in the utility district. Why don't we do something? So I said, well, let's start a bank. I'm sure I can figure out how to do one. And I went about it and organized a group of men who would invest money in the bank. Unknown to me, there were also two other groups interested in the same idea. So we merged all three groups and had one group raise $1.5 million in capital for the bank. Unfortunately, it was spread over 250 shareholders, very few of whom had much, many dollars in it, or much investment. Most of them were 50 and 100 shareholders. As a result, I found myself on an uncompensated basis spending an enormous amount of time explaining what was going on, telling them why we didn't get dividends or why we didn't earn more or why we did or didn't do this, that, and the other thing. And I just felt that I could not keep spending that much time with no compensation. An opportunity came to sell the bank from Kenny Marchand. Took it, made a profit. Probably would have done just as well and invested my money in savings and loans.
Lydia Gober of the Colony Chamber of Commerce.
Back in the mid-70s, when people were starting to come here and larger numbers of businesses were starting to come in, the business people kind of formed a little group so that they would be able to talk about what would help promote business better in the community, what would help get more people to shop here with them than going to Louisville or Carrollton or Plano. And several people of the merchants group started looking at the official organization of the Chamber of Commerce and what that could mean to a community. And as they worked with it, they did decide that they wanted to have an actual official Chamber of Commerce as opposed to a kind of loosely knit, not real strong organization of merchants. So the organization was formed, as I understand it, and chartered in 1979. And some of the people who were involved early on, as I understand it, were people like Steve Hines and Bill Backer and Carol Howard and really a lot of other people that I don't know all the names of because I'm fairly recently with the Chamber. But they actually got it on board, got themselves incorporated with the state of Texas, and formed a board of directors and started working together on some of their needs as business people. In the colony, the Chamber's been interested in the prospects for getting more industry, getting industry period into the colony, since really the home building industry is about the only one that we have here. So an industrial development committee was formed as a part of the Chamber as one of the work areas. And one of the things that was done about 2.5 years ago was to have an exhibit at the Business and Industry Exposition down in Market Hall in Dallas. And that was by way of attempting to attract some businesses and light industry to look at the colony as a place to settle. So industrial development is one of the areas, and if you like, I'll share some of the other work areas that we have in the Chamber.
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Please do.
Okay. We have a committee, or actually a division called Education, and that group works with both the public school district and seeing how there might be partnerships formed between the business community and the schools. And that education committee actually also works with ways to help the business people learn more about what they're doing to be more productive. For instance, last year they held a seminar on how your public image pays off in getting and keeping customers. So they do a combination of public education work and working to help their own business people. We have a special events committee, and one of the things that they have established is an annual fishing tournament here on Lake Louisville. We feel as a chamber that one of our greatest attractions in the colony is the lake, and we'd like to highlight more the lake in the life of the city. So the fishing tournament brings people from all around North Texas here who want to come and fish for bass or sand bass or crappie or whatever. And so that is a way of attracting people to the colony, getting some new people in the town, bringing some people in for that particular day, and they perhaps will partake of some of our business services and whatever. Special Events also does other kinds of fundraising for the Chamber itself, since we're a nonprofit organization and have our memberships to basically support our work. Another area we have is community development, and one of the areas under community development is beautification. And this past year, the Chamber sort of revived a previous program of having a kind of Lawn of the Month program where we put a blue ribbon sign on a lawn that was particularly attractive, where someone had paid special attention to keeping the outside of their home looking attractively. Also, we have retail development under our industrial development area we actually call that economic development. And we recently have had a group of people meeting with the city council to work on some of the ordinances, such as sign ordinances and permits regarding outside sales and things like that, where some of the merchants are feeling that they want to improve the capabilities of sales, and by sitting down with the city council, they're getting better acquainted and they're getting an idea what the needs are of the business community. That's it. I'm trying to think of some of the others. One of the biggest things that the chamber does is promote the colony as a great place to live, a great place to have a business. And some of the ways that we've been doing that are by having the first postcard of the colony itself. We have not had such a picture postcard in the past, so one of our chamber members, who is a commercial photographer, put together a very nice postcard. Okay, just the problem in 1984 was establish an attractive pictorial panel in the Dallas Living Center, which is a resource center for people who want to move to the Metroplex. And at the Dallas Living Center, through the Chamber's work, we have literature on the colony, and anyone who's interested in moving up in this direction from Dallas will get from the people at the Dallas Living Center brochures about the colony and that sort of thing. When we were talking before, Jim, about industrial and business recruitment, one of the things that we do is provide literature for prospective businesses. People will come into the chamber office frequently. I have people coming to the chamber office and they want demographic information about the city of the colony. Who lives here? Where do they come from? Where do they work? What is their average income? What type of transportation? And then what are the specifics on the city of the colony in terms of utilities, educational system, climate, population, taxes, that sort of thing. So we have a variety of information that we provide for that. We also provide city maps for people who are looking to find their way around the city. And one of the things that we've done to promote business this last year is to institute an annual shopping guide publication, which lists all chamber member businesses according to categories. People can just keep this by their telephone and use it for reference. So providing literature, we provide a lot of information, we provide a lot of referral kind of information when people call and say, where do I go to get my license plate changed? Where do I go for assistance with my elderly parent? Where do I go for a building permit? And questions of all sorts of things like that. So our office has really become quite a lot of information referral, much like the library.
You were instrumental in developing the library in the colony. Can you tell us why you thought that was so important?
When I was a council person, Louisville started a program of charging non-residents $25 a year for the use of their library. The few people, and I can't think of their names, but of the very few people, about 2 or 3, came up to me in the street and were talking, and they wanted to know, could we ever build a library in the colony, because they couldn't see paying Louisville $25 a year for a card. And I started to look around, and I went up to Denton, to the library in Denton, and the lady up there was very helpful, and she told me the best way to start a library was to start an organization known as Friends of the Library. And I came back here. In fact, she sent me the information, and I started to talk to a few people here. And God bless Wanda Gillett, because Wanda, she found the time to devote her energy to starting Friends of the Colony Library. I think it's really, I might have given Wanda the paperwork that was needed, but it was really Wanda Gillette's energy and dedication that started the Friends of the Colony Library, which showed the city council that there was a group here in the city that was willing to support the library. Just give them one and watch what they could do. And as I sit here now in this small building, but it's the beginning. And I see that there is a large support for the library here in the colony. And I think that's about one of the things I'm really most proud of. And somehow or another, I was the one that got the paperwork, but it was Wanda Gillett that did the running around.
Wanda Gillett, first president of the Friends of the Colony Public Library. Ann Beckel, first librarian of the Colony Public Library.
How did you become interested in forming the Friends of the Library organization?
Well, Bill Longo was, who was a council person that's been very active in the colony, was really the motivating force that got all of us involved and started, because Bill is the kind of person that you can say, hey, how about, and he really gets the ball rolling. So he really did the initial groundwork to find out if it was feasible to do a library. And then he got to talking to several of us that had expressed interest in it and that had asked questions to see about. He said that the Friends was really the organization that needed to get started and to really push, and we needed a group that could gather facts and be a cohesive force or something to present to the council the information that we had gathered that we considered necessary to form a library. We had an introductory meeting in June of '80. We met at the Methodist Church, and that was when we decided that yes, we really did run a library. We had about 30 citizens present, and we decided to go ahead and elect officers that night, and I wound up president kind of as a process of elimination. Of the ones that really thought they'd like to be an officer, I was the only one that had ever been a president of anything before, and so they said, fine, you be president.
So you brought some experience to the process.
Yes. I've been very active in PTA work up until that time and had been past president when we lived in Dallas.
Okay. What kind of community support did you find?
Initially, we had a lot of support, but as with many things that get started in the colony, there's a lot of support, and then when it drags on, they kind of fall away. We started out probably with between 30 and 50 people that were really gung-ho, and then by the time it finally wound up that we made the last presentation, that the council finally decided that they could support us and that they were willing to put forth the money to start a library, we had probably about 15 or 20 people.
How long did all this take, and what process occurred before the library was finally approved as part of the budget for the city?
Oh, it was 2 hard years. We met in people's homes for meetings. We met in the Methodist Church. We'd have we'd call a general meeting, and sometimes Ann and her husband and George and I'd be the only ones that'd show up. We had 2 other volunteers that worked with us that were real faithful too, Jeanette Larson and B.J. Rainier. So we could usually count on them being around. The 6 of us were really the ones, I guess, that you could say pushed the most. We'd have rap sessions with Don and Ann and George and I, and we'd say, well, we think we need to do this, and we'd take off on that tract. And then Ann wrote and got a lot of information through library systems, and we visited other libraries in the area to see what kind of facilities they had and see what we thought we would need, for very beginning basics. We talked about where could we have it. We even considered contacting the local railroad company and see if they would give us a boxcar or an old caboose that we could start our library in. Even that far back, they were talking about not using the fire station number 1 anymore, and we checked into that for the feasibility of converting that to a library. The biggest hurdle that we had to overcome was the monetary end of it, because in 1980 we had a tax revolt here in the colony that kind of slowed down the library process because of services that we wanted in the city, and because there's no commercial tax base out here, it all comes out of the citizens' pocket, and they were going to have a real big tax increase that year, and so they we had some problems that way, so that the council just like told us there was no way that they would even consider a library that way. But it was just a process that we just put down on paper what we thought we needed for basics, and then checking also with North Texas Library Services to see what requirements there would be for us to be included in that organization. And we just went to every council meeting there was. And every time there was a chance for citizen input, we input.
When did the city finally put the library in the budget?
It was June 82. June 82 for the budget that would begin in October
Of 82.
Yeah.
When did the library actually open its doors?
We opened in February of 82. I think we got funding.
You got funding in 81 for 82, and so when you opened the doors, you were part of the city budget process then.
Mm-hmm. We started with just volunteer books, though. People, donations. We had. We knew by that time that we were going to be in this space where we are now, and we had some Saturdays that we call library roundup days, and just anything and everything that people wanted to donate, we accepted. They came in here with books and paper sacks and boxes and grocery carts, and come in staggering with huge armloads of books, that they had cleaned out. A lot of them were books that we used just for count, that really weren't books that we knew that we couldn't put on the shelves, but we were after count as much as anything. But we got a lot of good donations from people too, that they just had them in their closets and decided that was a good way to get them out where people could use them and enjoy them.
And you were the first librarian here. What did you do with this massive influx of materials? How did you prepare them for the shelves? How did you deal with all that?
It was exciting. It really was. We, like Wanda mentioned, in December when we finally got in this facility, we had a lot of stuff stored in our garages for 2 years probably. So it was a real relief to get the garages cleaned up, first of all. And then we said, just bring whatever you want. Saturday, December, I'm going to say 10th, I don't remember the date. But people did, and that conference room was just filled. It was stacked through the ceiling. You couldn't walk through there. It was really, really great to see. That kind of support. Probably a lot of people did house cleaning too. A lot of stuff out there. I think they've been collecting too, because we kept saying, we're going to have a library, you save your books, and paperbacks. And then I think instantly we started that book sale table. We had a lot of stuff that way. And we sent off to archive, I guess, for catalog kits right away to get the materials processed and start getting them on the shelf. And then we only had about 2 months before we opened to really get things on the shelves. The first big task was getting the shelving up. And, I think we did that in January over a weekend period. And it was like one Friday night, I remember being here till midnight while the guys were nailing the shelves in and putting everything up.
Were these the original type of shelving that you have, what you see in the library today, the library shelving?
Yeah, that was one of the things that we said whenever we got started with it, that whatever city monies that we used, we wanted it to be something that would be an ongoing thing, and that when we knew that this facility would not be a permanent facility, that we could carry it forward and use it, the facility.
So the city budget the first year went a lot for shelving and furnishings, that type of thing.
Yeah, we didn't have any money for books at all the first year. And then we did go for a matching grant from North Texas for books and stuff. And I think we got $2,000 from that.
Could you tell us a little bit about what you mean when you say North Texas?
Okay, North Texas Library Systems is the part of the regional library systems for the state of Texas, in which we are a member of. And through that, we've received a lot of grant money, support for the professional staff, and video materials that we can check out for the patrons. And it's a real good program. That's something that we looked into right away 5 years ago.
Does this have something to do with going for count, as you mentioned earlier, Wanda?
Well, yes, because to be accredited by North Texas Library Association, when we had that Saturday call for books, we ordered catalog kits for her so that we could begin to put the packets together to, put the little envelope in the card that's the card holding envelope in the book, and some of the cards so we could start typing the names on the books, and so the books would be ready for circulation as soon as we were ready to open. We typed it home and we typed it in the library.
Late at night, a lot of people took stuff home and did typing at home.
That must have been hard to keep track of.
It was kind of a challenge. And then we had Sandy Gerke, who was the assistant librarian in charge of technical services. She did a tremendous amount of work in a very, very short period of time. It's unbelievable. She cataloged the books and get the things typed out. Then we have volunteers who would paste the labels and scan labels on. It got down to pretty much of a science, an assembly line type thing, in the conference room where the books were laid out. And just kind of went down the line and processed the book. We opened up, we probably had, I was thinking of nonfiction, maybe 3 or 4 books on a shelf, it looked real sparse. But there were things out and people did come in.
And when you first opened, the physical arrangement of this building was different, wasn't it, Matt? We talked a little about that.
We shared the space with the Park and Rec department, and what is the library director's office now was the Park and Rec office. And then this half of the library was divided into 3 small rooms that were each about 10 by 10. And one was shared by myself and the assistant librarian and about 30 volunteers. And then we had 2 smaller rooms that were divided into adult fiction and adult nonfiction. And in the hallway we had children's literature and nonfiction. So it was kind of chopped up, and it was kind of hard to supervise because you always had to go into the rooms and make sure, things were okay. But we were just real glad to have space and be able to be open.
Earlier you mentioned having a sale table. What's the purpose of the book sale? Where did the funds from that go?
That's a project, that's an ongoing project of the Friends. Books that we have that are duplicates, paperbacks that are not suitable to go on the shelves, or that are duplicates, or that have reached the point that they're really no longer serviceable, but that people could still enjoy reading. We have a table that we put them out, and I think we sell them like for 10 or 15 cents a piece. And this helps to bring money into the Friends. And then the Friends is a support organization for the library to provide the volunteers that Ann talked about that actually do a lot of the work. The librarian directs, and then they help, to man the checkout desk and get the books ready to go back on the shelves and things like that. But the monies, they buy things for the library that are not included in the budget, or that are little extras and things like that that would be nice to have, that are not necessary or that are not mandatory for the running of the library.
And how many hours were you open when the library first opened its doors?
When we first opened, I think I was paid for 10 hours a week, and the assistant librarian was paid for 10. I believe we stayed open 20 hours a week. And that involved Thursday night. And it was like 4 hours on Saturday and 4 hours 4 other days of the week. And closed on Mondays.
That doesn't mean that's all the hours they put in, though.
Good point. Good point.
We were probably working about 60 hours a week the first couple months. When we started out, we had our card catalog in shoeboxes, basically. They were kind of a gray box shaped like a shoebox and had a lid on it. And people could go through there and check and see what we had in the collection. And it got to be where it was rather tedious, and quite a few shoeboxes. So I was at an antique shop in Louisville a couple of years ago and found this particular card catalog there. It was an old antique one that the dealer was trying to get rid of. And so we talked and dickered, and I says, well, I can get a new one for this, And he says, well, I can sell you this one for this much. So we dickered back and forth again, and I finally got him down to a little bit lower than what he was trying to sell it for. Then it ended up, it dawned on me that I didn't know how to pay for the thing. I had this good deal and this good price and a nice set of drawers, but no money. So, well, go out on a limb and I'll write out a check. And he took my check, and that was no problem. Then I came back and I talked to the city manager about it, and he says, well, I don't think we can authorize that much spending. So I called Wanda up real quick. And the Friends ended up paying for that, I believe. And
About how much was it, just out of curiosity?
I think it was $500.
Woo. You see that the facilities and the collection here has changed over the 3 years. Is it pretty much what it started out to be, or has there been some changes?
I think the biggest change we know it is the reference collection, the additions of that, and the fine materials we have in those areas. We started out and you rely on donations. We got a lot of children's books, a lot of adult fiction, but very little nonfiction or reference. So that was something that had to be purchased.
I think our first set of reference books was Mr. Perot's set of encyclopedias that out of his personal library. Somebody in the colony knew somebody and contacted, and that's how we got a lot of early donations.
Which set of encyclopedias was that, do you recall?
Well, that was Britannica.
Is that the set that's on the shelf now?
Yeah. I can't remember. It was, I think it was either a 74 copy or something like that.
I'll have to take a look.
Probably still the same one.
Not real current, but it was just like brand new. It was something he had in his office.
Are there any other interesting donations you'd like to mention? You can recall?
Well, one lady, when we first opened, gave us $500.
Ooh.
With the stipulation that it all be spent on children's books. That was probably the biggest cash donation we got. We received $100 from other different individuals, and they were all stipulated for children's books.
But then didn't we have one invalid lady that you had befriended that gave us some money for adult books also after the children's selections were growing quite well, and she had read everything we had and had read everything in the surrounding libraries. And Anne, I don't remember how Anne.
Well, I worked at the Louisville Public Library one summer, and I met her through there. She used to live up on Pruitt Street, I guess, and fell down and broken her leg, so I was shuffling books back from the Louisville Public Library to her house, just delivering them for her so she could read. And then it ended up that we started our library here, and she says, do you remember me? She came in one day, and I said, well, sure, how you doing? And she says, I'm fine, and here's a check. And I just was completely for her. She says, that's for thanking you for bringing books back and forth for me. And I was real amazed, because I didn't think I'd done anything that great. It was just dropping books off at her house. But she ended up giving us a total, I think, around $1,000.
Oh my goodness.
It was really, really a neat lady.
Joan Sveinsson, interviewer for the previous segment, is currently the librarian for the Colony Public Library. Chris Fabian.
It happened the very last day of school in 1978 when my children, two of my children, which attended local schools, in fact, they attended Caney at that time, was the only school in the colony. And they came home the last day of school with a note that said, your children next year will be bused into Louisville to school. And they had the grade level at that particular year at Caney. But unfortunately, the city was growing at such a fast pace at that time. The school just was not capable of supporting that many children. So they divided a line at Nash Drive, and that forced the school children of that age bracket to be bused the following year. We had absolutely no advance notice from the school district. And I hit the ceiling. I was very, very upset with that decision, especially without giving us some time to go back and get involved in that decision. So I voiced my concern to the school district, called the superintendent, called the school, and I wrote a letter to the editor in the paper explaining my frustration and asking parents if they felt the same way I did to contact me. And boy, did they contact me. I received calls virtually for several weeks thereafter. And we decided we had so many people that felt the same way that we did to have a meeting. And at that meeting, we formed a group called the Colony School Committee. And the Colony School Committee was very active for about six months to a year, trying to reverse that decision. We looked at alternatives, tried to talk the school district into putting up portable buildings, anything but to keep the kids from being bused down to Louisville. And at the time, there was a lot of concern about the road situation, specifically 121.
What the board tells him said there would never be a portable building in Louisville.
That's right. There would never be a portable building in the school district. You take a look at the buildings we have floating around here now.
That they were well ahead of all expectations, and they knew exactly what Fox and Jacob was going to be.
I was elected chairman of the Colony School Committee, and we had a meeting with the council. The council did pass a resolution in support of looking at alternatives and things rather than busing the kids. And we dug up a lot of literature about the accidents that occurred. There have been many, many fatalities that year on Highway 121, and we were concerned about it. And as you know, this past year we had a bus that wasn't an accident out there. So, unfortunately, it's a situation that you get into in a growing community. But our response, of course, was, and it was a typical response, the Fox and Jacob salesman told us that our kids would be going to schools out here. We had moved in, we had been in about 3 months, and the next thing I know, they're going to be going to Louisville. And I was very upset about it. So,
Bob Hauck.
They make buses for 71 people. And state law says they can have one per seat standing, which means you can have 98 students on a bus. And I figure as long as the state says 98 per bus, you have to live with it. There's not a whole heck of a lot you can do to change that. And one day my wife went down and doing the first stop, and she started counting kids. There was 118 children on that bus, paid for 71 people. And we started dividing the bus. And then Chris and some other people formed the school committee by busing. And it was an uphill battle. They told us exactly where we belong and what we should do it ourselves.
Who is they?
The school board.
School district.
The school board.
Louisville?
Yes, independent school.
That was 1978.
78, yes.
78.
And we did have quite a confrontation with them for a long running battle. And then we found out that every individual in the country has the right to call the Department of Transportation and have their buses inspected as an individual. You didn't have to be a district or a city or anything else. At that point, the Louisville Independent School District changed their attitude about our purposes in life, and after several inspections on their buses where they didn't make it out of the barn on time, and half their buses were tied up and things like that, because of faulty maintenance, etc. We got them to agree to put the right amount of students on a bus for a change.
Charlie Parker, member of the Louisville Independent School Board and first resident of the colony to serve in that capacity.
Can you give us an outline history of the school situation here in the colony?
Yes. Louisville, I have to go back a little bit in history with the Louisville School District, to the best of my understanding. Louisville, over the years, had just been a small country town, 30 miles north of Dallas, that enjoyed the quiet life. When the people started moving south from the north, this area really started to grow. And those people that moved here were looking for the same ideals in the community that I was looking for. They wanted a quality of life, and so they moved into the Louisville area and into the colony. At that time, there were no schools out in this area. This was just farmland and ranch land. Well, since the colony formed, there was an immediate need over a very short time for schools for the children that were moving into this area. So Louisville grew up from a sleepy little school district to a very busy suburban school district with much stronger and growing demands.
What prompted you to run for the school board?
I think it gets in your blood. I was the youngest school board member in the history of Texas, elected when I was in Houston at the age of 21. I was just barely a legal voter at that time. I served 9 years, or was elected to 4 terms, and it's something that you just enjoy doing, contributing for the benefit of some young people. I had to resign that position in that area to move here. I hated doing it, but I had to do it for my professional career. I always enjoyed working with the schools, so when I had the opportunity to offer my experience and the things that I was aware of within public schools, I jumped at the opportunity.
Tell us something about the early problems with busing, for instance, the students from the colony into Louisville, and about the issue regarding the number of children per bus.
Okay, as I have mentioned already, Louisville was still waking up to the real world of large school district life, and they had no real plans or money to provide a school in the colony at the time. Therefore, suddenly there were hundreds and then thousands of school children moving into a brand new community called the Colony, some 17 miles from school, and no way to get them there. So rather than, or not having any money to build schools, they had to start loading them on school buses and making the trek down Highway 121 into Louisville. Buses were crowded. A normal 40 or 60 passenger bus may have been carrying 70 or 80 students. It was not a good situation at best. School district officials at the time did respond, and they finally were able to get some schools built into the colony, but for a long time, that long, cold in the winter and hot in the spring and fall ride was just a fact of life for colony students.
I understand the Louisville Independent School District owned the B.B. Owens site. Can you describe for us the background and the current status of the issues involved in that site?
B.B. Owens was an individual who left a large parcel of land, I think something like 40 or 50 acres, to the Louisville School District. It only had one string attached, but you had to build a school on it. In his wisdom, he did forget that this property was not in the city limits of the city of the colony. It all happened, so many things started happening at one time. The city was seeking to grow, the city of the colony was seeking to grow and expand their city limits to provide better services for the city, the community, and the people within the community. And the city to the north of us, Frisco, did not want to relinquish any land. It was within their jurisdiction, and they did not want to relinquish it. As all this was going on, the school district named the B.B. Owens site, which was some 1 foot out of the city limits of the colony, the site for the new Colony High School. To the consternation of the neighbors, to the city officials in the colony, and to the school district officials, it became just one nightmare after another. There were no utilities available because, once again, there was no serviceability to provide utilities to it. It was outside the city limits, so the police couldn't help, the fire department couldn't provide services to the school, and there was just a long, drawn-out period of talks and trade-offs and compromises, trying to find an alternate site for the high school. And eventually we did find one, but the B.B. Owens site still is available for use, and hopefully someday we hope that maybe an elementary school will be there if we can overcome all of these problems that we still haven't solved.
What are the current concerns of the citizens of the colony in regards to schools?
The biggest concern of the colony citizens is the completion of the Colony High School. When we complete that high school, we will also eliminate the number 2, or another big concern, and that's busing back and forth to Louisville. The city of the colony was in the beginning a young community, and there was not a real immediate need for a high school. As our city grows and the age group well, if the people within the community matures on, then of course we all have high school age children, and none of us want them going back on the bus into Louisville. So that's probably the biggest concern. The tremendous growth rate that the city has experienced has been a real challenge too. Trying to keep schools built and stay ahead of the growth instead of playing catch up all the time. I think these, of course, the just excellent education that the people insist on these days for education for the children.
Now, what do you see happening in the future in regards to the school situations?
In the future, I see another middle school, physically. Talk about that for a moment. The completion of the Colony High School, and already in addition to it, 2 more elementary schools, and this is within the next 5 years. I think probably in the long run, many years from now, it's not inconceivable to imagine the possibility that the colony could create, with the cooperation of LISD, its own independent district. There's a trend statewide to try to do these kind of things in some of the bigger school districts. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that could be done.
Janice Carroll, City Manager of the Colony.
How about the youth in the colony? What has been the role of the youth, and what's happening with that today?
Oh, well, we have lots of them.
Mm-hmm.
And saw a movie the other day that exemplified, I think it's called Over the Edge or something like that, but it exemplified a new community that started, and they didn't take into consideration the youth. Now, when we first were incorporated, I don't have exact statistics on this, but I would think the majority of our children were elementary school. And we used to have a few buses going into Louisville to the middle school. Now you can entertain a small child with at-home activities or a few sports. Well, we're starting to mature, and those people that did stay in the colony, not everybody moved out. You know, we have a nucleus of people who've stayed here. Those children are growing up, and they're demanding more and more activities, and that is one of our problems. We don't have the base, the commercial base here to provide activities for the youth. And we do have a group that formed, and I think that's one of our issues in itself, and it'll become part of our history, that petitioned for a recreation center. And because of that petition, because of that push from the Colony Youth Organization, we did put a recreation center on our bond package in with the proposition for the City Hall. And of course it passed 4-1. So we have a strong group of youth here. I think I know most of them are very positive, hardworking kids. We have that element there that causes our police department problems over and over and over. And we have the element of the latchkey child here. We have a lot of children with mothers work, and they do have a lot of unsupervised free time. I think a lot of those, mostly, I just feel sorry. It's just sorry for them. It's a victim of our lifestyle nowadays, with people having to work. But I think they're a very active force. They always have been. Recreation and team sports has always been a high priority. The rec center now is coming because of that priority. The swimming pool, I think, is coming primarily to gear towards the youth. And we're looking at a concept of a pool in a park where people can, particularly the youth, can come and gather and visit and socialize. But we have a lot of them. It's a very family-oriented community.
What about the Youth Advisory Board?
Okay.
What is that? And it's, again, a unique feature.
It really is, and it's just starting. I've been meeting with them. Last night they had, I believe it was their 4th meeting, and our police department met with them. The chief did. And of course, they're very interested in the police department, how they operate, and they had their meeting last night. That came about from this Colony Youth Organization and the petition, and by getting the recreation center on. And in the mayor and the council's discussion with the representative of the youth organization, the idea was formed to have a youth advisory board. And right now, they were formed by ordinance, but right now what we're doing is we're really just giving them information.
Mm-hmm.
They are learning about the city. We briefed them first and got their input on the bond propositions, particularly Rec Center.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're telling them about each department. And then anything that is youth-oriented will come to them first. They'll review, for example, an activity that's going to be geared for the youth. They'll review and give their recommendation to council. And the council will make the final action, but it'll be an advisory board that will serve the council and represent a very important faction in this community. Just as planning and zoning represents a certain function, and Park and Rec Board represents a certain function.
How are these members of the Youth Advisory Board selected?
Through an interview process by the council.
And then they are appointed by council?
Yes, they're appointed by council, and they serve the council.
And I presume you do see that as a continuing influence in this community, or do you?
I think it will. Again, I think that goes back to our colony spirit. I think that's something that we saw the need for, our citizens saw the need for, and council and staff did too, ultimately. But that's something, like you said, that not very many people have, very many cities have.
Mm-hmm. Do you know whose idea it was? Was it the idea of the members of the council or the youth themselves? Or
I think it started with the youth themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the council picked up on it very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And probably named it the advisory board. Again, I wasn't a party to the actual discussions on it.
Marlene Poole, member of the Colony City Council.
You become involved in the community affairs of the colony.
I got angry.
Why?
To me, the colony has a lot of pluses going for it. And one of the things that impressed me was the fact that it was an all-brick city. What deterioration would take place in a building would be nominal compared to what I had seen in some other cities. Fox and Jacobs started a new product line. They built 2 model homes that were of a stucco exterior, and they came in, and the colony has been used as experimental ground for them on a lot of things, and this was one of their big experiments. They came in, I think they were just trying all different new types of erection and building styles at this time, and they built these model homes in 7 days, and were quite proud of themselves for what they had done. Well, I went up to see the model homes because I was curious to see how they looked with the 7-day, from start to finish. I mean, walk into the building all decorated, the whole thing. I was extremely disappointed in them. At that time, it was a basic unit. It was, everything was optional. You had little signs. This kitchen cabinet is an option. This door is an option. I mean, it looked like that a Jim Walter's home that they were calling a Fox and Jacobs. I mean, I was very disappointed, and I guess the biggest disappointment was the exterior, which was not even a good grade of stucco. It was, to me, and I don't know if there's such a thing, but my terminology is an imitation stucco. I don't know if that is a true thing. And in talking with the salesman, he just made me furious. And he said, well, lady, you may as well just get used to this because there's not a damn thing you can do about it. And my husband said, uh-oh, you said the wrong thing. And that's how it got started. It came out in the paper. And at that time, Scott North was sitting on the city council. He was mayor pro tem. And he, too, was upset about it. And so I picked up the phone and called him. And I said, what can we do about this. What can we do to help you? Because I know you also are upset about this, and he will probably die if he sees this tape. But he said, well, you could get up a petition. So I called some neighbors, and within about an hour and a half that evening, we had a meeting at my house with about 20 to 30 neighbors that came in, and we discussed what we should do and how we should go about it, and were we a minority in this thinking, or did other people feel the same way? So we decided that we needed to go ahead and go around and sample the other sections of the town and see what people were feeling. So one of the men said, well, I have the ability to use word processor. He said, let me go ahead and I will do us up a petition type thing. And let's go out and see what happens. So he did that. We met the next night, and like I said, there were about 20 of us, and we took different streets throughout the city, and we took an hour as our target time and came back, and we had over 300 signatures within an hour, so we knew we were on the right track. So then we just got carried away. We did some handbills. We got in front of Winn-Dixie, and we went to council the following Monday night with almost over 1,300 signatures. So that's how it started.
And all of this was before you became a council person?
Yes.
Ron Walden, formerly of Fox and Jacobs.
But along in that early period of time, we deed restricted each subdivision as it was platted. And we deed restricted each subdivision to single-family detached homes only. And we also put a minimum house size of 1,000 square feet on each section. And some of the sections and because we began to sell several different price ranges of houses, some of them had deed restrictions up to, 1,400 or 1,600 square feet. But the whole colony had a minimum of 1,000 square feet, always had it. Well, in 1980, the company developed a prototype for a line of houses that where the customer have an option as far as the masonry on the exterior of the building being either stucco or brick. And at that time, we started to build that particular series of houses in all the communities where they had, similar masonry requirements, and that was permitted in the colony. So we built 2 prototype houses on the north end of the colony, not far from 423, with stucco on them. And one of the houses, as a matter of fact, was, and I'm trying to remember this, but I think it was under 1,000 square feet in size, and that was done by an oversight in our construction department. And at that time, I was out of the land function for a short period of time and was in general management. But I remember getting back into it because I was called on to remember how we got where we were in terms of the minimum house sizes. And by the time I got back into the picture, there was a sizable uprising about, it looked like Fox and Jacobs was going to build nothing but small houses in the colony, and they're all going to be made out of stucco, and they're all going to be painted blue and white and red. And so there was a real hubbub. So I employed the same process that I'd always done, for the best in the past, and that was, let's sit down and talk about it. So we sat with the head of the committee of homeowners that were petitioning to have the minimum house size increased, and also the elected officials, and worked out a compromise. My memory was that was the first time that Marlene Poole, who is currently serving on the council, got active in the government in the colony. And she helped work out the compromise where we actually set up a procedure with the city to at the time we platted a subdivision section to commit to what size houses would be in that section. And we also committed to a mix of housing for the whole community. Interestingly enough, the mix was the same mix we'd had prior to that time, but it gave comfort to those people who were concerned about that mix was going to be continued or exceeded. And the other thing was, the one radical change that did come out of that particular incident was that stucco was eliminated as a masonry form completely from the colony, which we felt like was a mistake because, it certainly used for trim purposes, there's nothing wrong with stucco. But that's one of the things that comes out of it when you don't do your homework.
Normally F&J was pretty sensitive to what they would put out here working with us, but they goofed one time. And they built these little models off 423 again, let's say west of, east of 423 in the northern portion of our city. And they were going to be what they called cottages, a smaller product line. And they decided on their own they wouldn't brick them. They would just make them a stucco or masonry type finish. We called it the stucco houses. Well, some citizens said, no way. And they got a massive group together, a petition against it. And F&J agreed that they would brick all the homes, and consequently we passed an ordinance requiring all homes to have 65% brick on them. So they should have come to us before they ever did something like that. And I think the biggest issue between Fox and Jacobs and the colony is a marketing issue. We are all here, and we're proud of our city. We want it to develop as best it can and be as high a quality city as it can. And they're looking at a marketing issue where they want to build a house that's affordable. Sometimes those two things don't agree. Mm-hmm. And particularly to us that have already bought our house. And we bought an 1,800 square foot home for $35,000 back in the old days. Well, that citizen is not as concerned with someone that's going to spend $50,000 for a 1,100 square foot house. Mm-hmm. And sometimes those two attitudes just don't meet. And we've had some rough disagreements on that.
Any other issues in relation to F&J that you'd like to mention before we move on to another topic?
Well, density is another issue, and again, it's a marketing issue for them, getting more houses per acre, and how they're built. And we're looking at, the city's looking at a quality product. We're looking at traffic problems. So that's something that we're currently we're always discussing with them. They've got a few out parcels left that have not been developed, and density is an issue on those parcels. They want to go with something with a townhome type of thing, or a zero lot line, whatever. It's all, nothing has been decided, but it's something I know that they're looking at. And we've got traffic problems here. Their traffic is going moderately smoothly now. But until we get the north-south roadways opened up and until we get 121 widened, we're going to have traffic problems. So that's the thing of the future between Fox and Jacobs in the city.
Control of rental property. It's been another big issue here.
So I think
about that.
I think that again relates back to the caring citizens of the community that love the colony, have that spirit of the colony, and want to keep a certain quality to our community. And the homes that were built out here that were attractive to all of us because they were several $1,000s less than what we could buy a home for in Carrollton or North Dallas area, also attracted investors. And because we had a lot of young people that came out here and bought homes and then moved or could not afford the homes, we had a lot of good deals, so to speak, out here, and investors started moving in. Well, I really don't think it's the council or my viewpoint that we are against someone renting a home. I lived in apartments for years before I ever bought my first home. But we are against a large percentage of those homes being investor-owned homes. And we're against the absentee landlord that doesn't care what his property looks like. And because of that concern, the council has really initiated 2 ordinances, one requiring that a certificate of occupancy be issued every time the house changes from an ownership standpoint. And the second one being what we call the landlord license, or single family residence license, SFR license is what our inspection calls it. And that is a licensing of landlords as literally a business.
Mm.
And they have to license each home that they have. And they're subject to a once a year inspection. Now it's caused a lot of disagreement among some of the people that own homes here in the colony for investment purposes and the council. And that was a heated issue. And the people that were against the council and the mayor on that issue backed certain candidates this past election.
Mm-hmm.
However, I've got to say, our mayor won by a landslide. So I think the citizens agree they want this to become a quality, family-oriented community.
What does the certificate of occupancy consist of?
We come in and inspect a home for unsafe conditions. It's a CO, we call it. It is what you do in a new home or you do on another home after it changes, to make sure that the wiring is correct, the plumbing works, there's nothing structurally wrong with the house. It's not a cosmetic thing, although we try to look at the cosmetic approach also. Paint, if it was totally gone to the point that your wood is going to deteriorate, is a structural thing. We would make them repaint the house. Is to keep that house in a safe condition for people to live in. And we're hoping to prevent that rundown effect that happens in a lot of communities. Those neighborhoods get over it.
Mm-hmm. The COLTS organization.
Yeah.
Just who are they? What does COLTS stand for?
Can't remember what COLTS stands for. Isn't that terrible?
That's okay.
We just call them the COLTS. I've not been real actively involved in them. The best I know, Carl Fisher is the gentleman that organized them. Marge McCormick is another lady in it. The others, I don't really know. These are landlords, are people that own homes in the colony that rent them. And the ones that I know of all live in Carrollton and Palm Springs. So they're not colony citizens.
Okay.
Now, I can sympathize with their concerns. They felt like because they owned homes in the colony, we were tagging them as villains.
Mm-hmm.
And we really did not need to do that. But, it became a political issue. Mm-hmm. And there is a point that we are controlling something that today in Texas would never be considered a business, and that's owning a home and renting it. So we're the first city in the state of Texas that I know of that's initiated this ordinance. Mm-hmm. I really thought COLTS would take us to court on it, and they haven't.
Were they the ones that backed candidates in this recent election? Okay. Let's talk about current situations. Water.
Well, I think that's been solved, I hope.
In what way? What was the first water situation and what is it today?
Well, we've always been on wells. Now, of course, the utility district handles the water and sewer and the drainage, storm sewer drainage for the city. And we've been on wells for our water supply. The wells are into the Trinity Aquifer, I believe, and at this point in time, or in this area, there's a high mineral content, a high sodium content. And the water really has not been the best quality. I think the joke is we don't have a Texas water supply approved, or water supply approved by the state of Texas sign. And that was a big issue several years ago to get water to the Dallas water to the colony. We had a bond issue, or I say we did, the utility district did. And it was a landslide. It won by, I can't remember the vote, but it was a landslide, a one proposition election. And the utility district has built that water line, and we now have Dallas water now. It was late in being completed, and I know they have some engineering problems. They had a contract with Dallas on that, and the council was concerned about our right to have much water out of that line because it comes from Dallas, and Carrollton has a right to some of that water also. So it's an issue, and it's become an issue now, not so much from a quality standpoint, although we're always concerned with that mix, but it's a development issue. What this council is very concerned about now is development of this community, particularly commercially. And the only way we can develop is to have adequate water service. And that's why that water line is very, very important, that we protect our right to the water.
Okay, at this point in time, the municipal utility district, which existed prior to the incorporation of the colony as a community, is still separate from the city government. Has there been any discussion of merging or not merging, and what's going on there?
Yes. That's our present crisis, I suppose, in our long line of issues. We've always talked about it. We've always felt like that we should merge at some point in time. However, about 2 years ago, they were granted by the PUC a regional status.
The Public Utilities Commission in the state of Texas.
Yes, by the Public Utilities Commission's regional status to service an area with water and sewer. Well, we still feel like we should be merged. The city does. So based on that, and in talking with the Mud Board and the council, we decided to have a feasibility study done on merging. That has just been completed, and it really recommends not merging until some future day. And it recommends a lot of interlocal agreements, and I think we both feel a very cumbersome way of us working together. And right now, I think the council's opinion, and mine too, is that it really would be to our advantage to merge. From the standpoint of saving money on a day-to-day basis, on the standpoint of the taxing ability, from the standpoint of promoting development, we think that it would be a good thing to merge. Now you have two political entities here. The Mud Board, which is a 5-member board, does not agree with us on it. And you have that element of distrust again that has come up. Actually, it's always been there between the Mud and the city. And I think, my personal opinion, what happened, and long ago, the Mud Board was run by business because the people that were on that Mud Board were Dave Hauck's friends that owned a little piece of land out here. They were on the Mud Board. It had to be formed that way. And it was run very businesslike, but it was run to Fox and Jacob's benefit. Now the citizens came out and we formed our government. And we started developing the way we wanted to for the citizens' benefit. And those two didn't always agree. Now what has happened, the Mud Board no longer is businessmen that are Dave Fox's friends, but they are citizens of the community. But I feel like they have not been subject to the public scrutiny like the city has. And I think some of their organization has dwindled because of that. And I feel like the city has strengthened because of what we've gone through and always being on the line, so to speak, on every issue and all the crises. And we've grown, we've strengthened, we've developed into 9 departments. They really have 2. It's water and sewer, and I guess the county department or billing. But that's the only function they have. Now we have so many more, and we've grown. They have about 35 employees. We have about 67 or 68. We're not counting part-time. So, that balance is shifting. And I think they're looking too that at some point in time there's going to have to be a merger.
2 things. One, you mentioned they have been granted regional status by the PUC. What does regional status entail? Do you know?
Generally, I think that that gives them an area, literally a boundary that they can serve, they can annex into or serve by contract.
And that's beyond the area of the
Beyond
colony?
the city. It goes up into the area to the north of the colony and a little bit to the east of the colony that really is primarily Frisco's. E2J. Of course, you know about the suit with Frisco.
We can get into that in just a minute. Okay.
And it does go into that area.
Okay. The other thought that I had was, even though there's been this feasibility study, what do you see happening? Do you see a merger somewhere down the line?
I do, personally.
But you don't have a prediction as to how far that...
Right now, you're talking about this being in oral history, it's happening right now. And there's a lot of opinions as to when that will be. I heard this morning the Mud Board passed a resolution to set a date of October '88. I've talked to some of our council and says that's not soon enough. So that's as of today. So
as of today, it's anybody's guess.
That's right.
It will most likely happen.
I think so.
Okay. Any other comments on the relationship between the city of the colony and the Mud?
Well, I'll say that the board and the council have always been at odds. This council and this board, even though they are at odds, I think have communicated more than any other time in our history. The staff, although it feels the strain of that, I think it's always worked fairly well together.
Mr. Larry Sample, Mayor of the Colony, Texas.
Starters, let's talk about the background. Maybe you could fill us in on the background of the lawsuit between the city of Frisco and the colony.
I was on council when I first started this. And one of the things that Mayor Pollard did, I'm going to give him a lot of credit for this because I think it's something so elementary that you have to work on to have a good, stable government with a future. And that's it. You have to know where you're going. You have to know what your boundaries are going to be. And I don't believe anybody ever thought of that. We were very limited in the land. We knew that basically it was very iffy that the city would survive if we didn't increase the land mass. We were marginal with our land mass to have a good, stable, perpetual government, which I think is what everybody wants out here. So we looked around, we looked at what Frisco had done back in the early days and the logic boundary agreements, and this city was really done dirty. It's almost like in concert, the cities of Louisville, Frisco, and Hebron, within 6 months, all moved their boundaries and boxed this city in. And we started looking at how do we get out of this? And of course, one option was Wynwood Peninsula, and we won that portion of the Frisco suit, which gave us the first outlet the city had ever had on some additional lands. And I think it'll prove valuable in the future. We looked at the 5-foot ETJ strip around the city of the colony, and it just didn't look legal to us. And I still say, according to what I know of the intent of the laws and annexation